Thanks a million, John. Okay, so I'm just going to rock on. So I was talking to Stephen earlier on, my first time meeting Stephen today. You know, we could give Stephen 4 hours. I'm sure he would entertain us for 4 hours and tell us a lot, but we've given him 40 minutes generously instead. So Stephen is the Professor of New Media Environments at the Centre for Excellence in Bournemouth University. He's worked on a large number of projects over the last number of decades, and he's a recognised leader in the fields of learning, new media and technology. If you just have a look on YouTube or Google Stephen, you'll find plenty of videos and lots of interesting articles and pieces of research he's been involved in. Stephen, I suppose, has worked on worked with government bodies, he's worked with universities, worked with private schools across the world. We certainly had a very interesting morning talking about some of those different projects, and I hope will be sharing those with us today. So really, without further ado, if I could introduce Stephen to talk about building better learning, learning better building. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Well, golly gosh, 40 minutes and best part of 40 years to give you, so it's a year a minute. A couple of things about myself, really. I am building learning spaces all around the world. One of the things you learn from... Press the HDMI button. One of the things you learn, that's me in a hard action. One of the things you learn is that people have very different needs. Every learning space is unique. This is in the Caribbean, built these about 5 years ago, and it's a school, and you can see the direction the hurricane would come from, and you can see it's built hugely strongly. Just the other day, of course, the hurricane came, and the community all rushed into the building and sheltered and survived. So everybody has different needs. I was in Johannesburg last week, terrifyingly rough place at the moment. And they have a huge shortage of teachers at all, school level, university level, wherever. I think there's currently about 31 million children around the world displaced from learning, and even with a ratio of 30 to 1, we haven't got 1 million teachers to fix their needs. I've got a project in Jordan for the Syrian refugees, and they haven't even got any parents at this point, so one mum between 4 or 5 families. So everywhere we look in the world, people have got different needs from their learning. That said, you've got the most gorgeous campus here, the most gorgeous country actually. I think I'd better apply to the Irish post-Brexit, I'm actually a professor these days, less so in Bournemouth. I'm tenured in UCJC in Madrid now, and pretty cool place to be actually, Buenos Dias. And of course they have different needs there too, especially this side of the weekend when civil war appears to have broken out, so it's an interesting time. I'm a sailor. I've been to Cork lots sailing, and I just show you my boat really because, like me, it's very old. It's the one on the left, 110 years old this year. It's kind of interesting, I think, because as you walk around the campus here, it's a lot like my boat. There's a lot of craft and tradition in this boat. There are no winches, no cleats. It's all done the way we used to do it a few generations before me. But below decks, it's more like NASA, really. It's bristling with lights and computers and goodness knows what else. And I think that combination of the craft of great learning and the opportunities of new science make the boat pretty exciting, make higher education probably more exciting than it's ever been. You won't be teaching the way you taught 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, probably not now, and that's hugely challenging, and how we build those spaces is interesting, and yet little things still matter. I'm a granddad. Some of these are my grandchildren, not all of them, heaven help us, and they live with me. And here they are all building little model boats. I'm a great advocate of the maker spaces all around the world, and what you get from tiny kids making and learning. This was a comment on Facebook just the day after that, and yeah, we want students coming out of here that are all those things. fearless, inquisitive, brave, rather seduced by learning. And that's a very hard thing to design for. It's a very hard thing to build a pedagogy for. If I was to look at what are the things that employers are seeking most, perhaps let's go to this is an OECD summary, I think, of this is what CEOs were looking for around Europe. And it's a pretty interesting list. I mean, knowledge is still there, 19%. But you can see the other things there. One or two of these, when, as with this, a lot of people hold their phones up to take a picture. I'll just tweet the images onto that hashtag later, so don't worry too much. But building a space that leaves your students with a clear breadcrumb trail of evidence of their honesty and their collaboration, their communication skills. You go out to get a job, the first thing the employer asks you, what do you like as a team player? And there's not much of an answer to say, don't know mate, I've been in education for 17 years. Give us a job and let's gamble together. I mean, it doesn't it's not a route forward. So, we're looking for different outcomes from the ones we were looking for not so long ago. If I take the PISA folk who designed the test that your ministers, my ministers, everybody's ministers are driven by, that's Andreas talking to a bunch of policymakers in China about where PISA's going. So, the kids coming through school in Ireland will be looking to attain those outcomes, and will be looking to extend those outcomes as part of their university life. And that's a very different world to the PISA world of 5 years ago, where they just had to know stuff and evidence it and know more stuff when they got to higher education. So we really are, it's a different game, and we're on a different playing field altogether, and that needs different design, different architecture and different thoughts, and that's what we're here to think about today, really. I can put some flesh on those bones. Here's, I don't know if you use Google's Ngram viewer. It's entirely good fun over lunch. It's they digitized every how many million, you'd know better than me how many million books Google has digitized, but it's roughly all of them, and you can search them. So I can search for learning, which you can see. This is the age of learning. You turn on your television tonight. Doesn't matter where I am in the world, I'll see people learning to bake, learning to dance, learning to sing, learning to play football, whatever. If I search for education, not so hot. I think the death of education and the dawn of learning is roughly where we are, I think, at this point. And by the way, if I search for learning spaces, might be fun. Oh look, suddenly what we're talking about today is, oh, by the way, if I look for fake news, which might be fun. Slightly depressing, really, because the last peak, of course, was just short of World War II. So you can learn a lot from this sort of stuff. I don't want to over-egg it, but everybody around the world is talking about this stuff, talking about how they build spaces that seduce people back into learning, retain them, engage them in a world where everybody is fighting for the attention of your students. Paying attention turns out to be a business for a lot of people, and you're competing in that new world too. So the gorgeous quad, the fabulous building, the Harry Potter-esque doors, are a part of all this, but also the seduction of tomorrow and the excitement of new learning. And if I was, this is an interesting bit of research we did, last bit of context really, but we asked a lot of people about their best learning experiences, and it's not a surprising list. It's unashamedly constructivist model of learning, really. But if you say to yourself around campus, where do those things happen? That's quite an interesting design question. I've seen people doing stuff all over the place. I haven't seen a lot of passion and eccentricity. The campuses that I've seen are a little short on playfulness. It's a very starchy, it's kind of, this is higher education. When you're higher here, a little short on fun. And it's interesting, I tripped over some quality assurance folk in a corridor earlier, no doubt been visiting some of you. I'm not sure they were looking for passion and eccentricity, but they jolly well should have been. And it's all too easy, I think, to build learning that is so standardised, so controlled, so anodyne, that we forget to make it. Let me show you what I mean by that. Here's a trivial example or two. I built a school on the south coast of England. Actually, I built it for my grandchildren. I have more grandchildren. And their school was frankly dreadful. So I'm not my judgment, that was the judgment of the teachers and the parents. It needed something doing to it, and we built a new school together. It was a community project. But they didn't want to use the library. I'm sorry to tell you this. So they didn't want to use the library. It was pretty dull. So we built, actually I paid for it myself. I built a pretty decent slide. And you get to use the slide by taking books out. And if you take books out and prove you read them, you get to jump out of the window, plummet down. It's staff development is always a question. So the staff development, you drank a lot of beer and then jumped out of the window. But I'll tell you what, the library is the coolest place on the planet for those kids. But it's not just about fun. This is why it's interesting. What we now know about cognitive processes, we can stick kids' heads in functional MRI functional scanners, and see what lights up, and we ask them to do different things. We know that cognitive mapping is a function of those social cues and clues, the semiotics of learning, if you like. So there's something about the day you jumped out of the window of the library, having read whatever, that retains. There's something about that crazy teacher you had when you were young that you remember the moment they ran around the desktops or whatever eccentric thing they did, because that social marker was the thing that, so if I peer through some of the lecture theatres here, say to yourself, how would that be different tomorrow? If I was looking at my notes as a student, how would I remember, that was the whatever the date is, that was the 11th of October. We did that because that was the day, the teacher beamed in from their boat somewhere else, or whatever they did that was a little bit surprising. Your students are going out to a world full of surprises, and being able to know your stuff well enough to harness it, to tackle surprises, is a huge challenge. By the way, I believe in this stuff so much, I built this in my own house as well, so we've got slides for the kids, and I thought, because I'm kind of health and safety conscious, I thought maybe the only way you can get down the slide is to climb up the climbing wall, so in this way the tiny ones won't get down, but I failed to allow for the support they get from the other ones, so damn, even the 1-year-olds up there jumping down the slide, You don't know how good your students could be with the help of others. The one thing I promise you is way beyond where you think it is. I'm building a school in New South Wales, just outside Sydney, funnily enough on the campus of the Sydney University of Technology. We stole their campus for a school, controversially. And I had 227 kids who were thinking of coming to the school with their parents so we could show them our intentions. And one of the things I said to them is, when you're ready, at what age are you ready to go to university? Never mind cooking or car driving or snogging or whatever big kids do. When are you ready to go and learn the subject you're passionate about? Of the 227 kids, no child said 18. They all say, I'm ready now, I could go. Said to her, there was a lad in the front row, I said, what are you good at? I won't try and do a fake Aussie accent, this is just demeaning really, but he said, English, I love English. I really love English. I said, so when could you go to college to read English? He said, I could go now, I can't wait. And then he paused and he said, actually, everything I've learned this year I knew already. Yeah, I could have gone last year. Yeah. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 15, you know, and a very kind of, I'm 15, you know. So he was ready at 14. And most, let's be honest, most of what you did at 24 or 25 or kids are doing now at 16 and 17, why would that not include teaching and learning? And it will. You know, you're in that challenging space where I'm busy. I wrote this for the British government, asked me, this was Michael Gove, David Willits, head of schools, head of higher education, head of industry. They said, Stephen, what does the future of learning look like? By which they meant 2025, you know, just a few days away. And I said, well, I'll get a group of people together. We spent a year, you know. I don't have a collective noun for professors, you know, a muddle. But we got us all together and we spent a year looking at. We said, okay, with certainty, there are three things. You know, this is going global. This is going global, you know. If you're not aware on a day-to-day basis, you know, what's happened to student fees in Germany? They were abolished completely last October. There are no fees left. You can go to German university from anywhere in the world, you will pay no fees. You know, so that's relevant to you because the higher education teaching is all in English. They're your immediate rivals. Kids from England are pouring into Netherlands at the moment for higher education. A private university in Spain charges less per year than a public university in England, about 50%. So, you know, this is a global market. Second thing, we're going to know a lot more about how we make learning work, and we'll look at that in a second. And third thing, the students are going to own it. Look, I'm self-evidently too fat, but at least I know it now. So I know what my BMI is, I know what I should be eating, I'm losing weight, going down, you know. And I know that I've got data on my phone, some of you got smart watches, and lots of ways in health that you manage your own health. 20 years ago, I'd have gone to see the doctor and he said, well, Stephen, you're going to be dead, you know, dead in 10, and 10 what? 9, 8, 7, you know, too late, you know. Now you're looking after your own health, your students will entirely manage their own learning. And I don't mean within this college, I mean within the colleges within which they learn. They'll do a year in Madrid and a year here, and for sure a year in China because they need Mandarin, you know, and they'll be flitting all over the globe collecting the fragments of their graduation, which they've chosen, the pathway that they've selected. And you've got to win that battle of seduction of saying, you know what, this is a place you want to be. And some of that is about the details. So let's unpack some of that a little bit. Right now, slightly scary. Oh, by the way, you know, as we walked around today, I was very conscious of the faculty structure. What's happened in Finland, as you know, is they don't have subjects in Finland anymore. They've gone. Entirely project-based work. You know. And you know why they've gone, because of this. Here's a, oh sorry, not because of that. Because of, maybe, because of, this will do. Because of this, here's a really boring graph. I think we should see a boring graph at this stage. These are the science scores of kids around the world, and you can see, I think, that Finland is the best place in terms of kids' attainment in science, you know, by a country mile. But there's another axis, isn't there? You know, and the other axis is whether kids are even vaguely interested in carrying on doing science when they leave education. And in Finland, that's the least likely to happen. Who's got a Nokia phone in here? Just show of hands. It's embarrassing, but he's admitted it, you know. You know, I mean, I've got one in a cupboard somewhere, but, you know, you wouldn't have it now. And the reason is right there. Kids left school in Finland and do not want to go and work for tech companies doing science. And as a result, they've torn up the curriculum and said, Project-based learning, that's what's going to... I mean, you'd sooner here. You'd sooner be up here also. You'd sooner be up here, wouldn't you? Up in, Brazil, Mexico. The kids don't know much science, but they're going to carry on doing it for a lifetime. By the way, they've got vigorous illegal drug industry, so there's some science, sort of going on there. But look, there's nobody here. And if you're going to be significant in higher education going forward, that's the place you've got to be. So let's look at what that looks like in terms of design. Let's look at this first of all. Well, the room we're in at the moment is interesting in terms of the space. Let's have a little glance here at the light levels in the room. So we know that you're looking for light levels of 500 lux or better to be able to engage your brain. At this point, you're already feeling a little bit after lunchish, I would suggest, And the light levels in here are, well, 500's a minimum. I checked outside, it's just short of 9,000 outside. So you're in a kind of pool of light here. What do you reckon you're sitting in here in terms of light levels? 79. So there's a sort of there's a kind of pedagogic waterboarding thing going on in the front row here. It would be genuinely impossible to engage intellectually for very long in that level of light. And trust me, it's worse at the back. So those levels really impact. I'm building schools to 750, building universities to 1,000 lux at the moment. And to do that is complex. CO2. Do you notice how your skin's got a very slight sweatiness, closeness to it? Can you feel that at the moment? That's because you're gassing each other with your own emissions. That's what's happening at the moment. You're all, I don't mean, I mean from here, not from here, clearly. Or maybe that too. When you prepare for lunch. Here's a typical closed space in this is a school, but it could be a seminar room or whatever. So this is CO2 during the day. They come in and kids, hopefully they start breathing. You kind of shoot for that, I guess. And here's break, and you can see by the time we get to break, we're over well over 3,000 parts per million. Your concentration starts to be damaged at 2.2. So I'll put the line on there for you, make it easy because you're already mid-soporific, And then they go out for break, the door opens, CO2 hangs around, it's a heavy gas, very patient gas. They come back in, they carry on breathing. By the time we get to lunchtime, we're over 4,000 parts per million. And even when they go out for lunch and come back and open the windows because they've been running around in the playground, it's still at a damaging level. So looking at that day in the life of a learner, the only time when they were able to properly focus, even if the light was good enough, was that little moment before 10 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, I was waiting for the first person in here to yawn because I bet with myself it would be less than half an hour if you said, well done. And the rest of you will be stifling a yawn at this point because the heat is also not conducive to learning. 17 to 21 degrees, optimal for learning. Every degree over 21, your brain starts to slip away. And it's a straight line. Every degree it gets worse. So this is all quite good fun. What does that look like in terms of buildings when we build them? Let me show you a couple. Here's a building I've built in, we've built, say hi. All I did was bring in our Learnometer data. If you want to see more of that data, go to learnometer.net. It's a GIST funded research program. We're looking at humidity and all the other components of all this as well, and it's pretty horrific. If you want to scare yourself, just go into your examination rooms and measure the difference between one side of the room and the other, and say to yourself, how am I going to explain to students and their parents that by sitting a child over there and not over there, they probably dropped 3% on the exam paper for sure. And on what's supposed to be a level playing field. You know, if you're sitting over there by the light and you're sitting over here in the dark, you drop 3%, and what 3% doesn't quite get you on the PhD program you'd want to, which doesn't quite get you the job you'd hope for, which diminishes your income stream and indeed your children's income stream. So not unreasonably you'd sue for what, I don't know, 10 million, something like that, because they sat you on the gloomy side of the classroom. This is hugely impacting stuff, hugely so. And so this is a lovely building. This is a building built around that learnometer data. One of the real surprises looking around here, these wonderful spaces you've got, the Boone ground floor with those huge corridors and the atrium outside, completely unused. You know, if you were to say, Stephen, have a faculty, where would you like to put it? I would put it there. You've got light pouring through from skylights in the ceiling, but some silly person has painted it all, as far as I can see, dark grey, and the bits they haven't painted dark grey, they seem to have imported all from the local hospital. They're sort of hideously institutional, creamy, greeny yuck, you know, and they've taken all the furniture away, so all you can do is walk around and feel suicidal, I would suggest, you know. But potentially as a space for learning, wow. You know. So you can have little pop-up spaces, you can just say to people, look, this is the atrium, and it's that bright because we put a huge hole in the roof to let the light in, and it's pretty gorgeous. And look here, this is not a faculty building, this is a fusion building, so all faculties share it. You can't timetable it, but you can book it. So if I look down here, I can see our Vice-Chancellor here having a meeting with somebody. I can see one of those little quiet booths that you've very sensibly put in, you know. I call them spaces for weeping. I think even when you have opened the plan, you have to have a place to go and cry, you know. You need to be able to shut the door, you know. There are folk down here having lunch, you know, and all in the same space. And no parallel spaces at all. Just had lunch, best higher education lunch I've had in a decade, I think, outside of Spain. And what a noisy room we were in, because windows here, and parallel to the windows, a concrete wall, and sound bouncing backwards and forwards like a ping pong ball, you know. Really, no parallel surfaces in this building at all. And the vertical surfaces are all clad with wood to keep the sound down, you know, and well, you just roof terraces so we can get fresh air. Just the most gorgeous space, you know. Skype bars so you can sit at a desk and Skype to other people around the world, because it's a global world we're in of higher education. Crucially, and some traditional lecture theatres, but mostly these turn and learn theatres. So you have a set of terraces, chairs on each terrace, you sit around the table, people on the front, pivot and look, you deliver 20 minutes of a lecture, then you say, right, talk to each other, they spin round and they have a little seminar together, then they spin back. Turn and learn works really, really well. Universities all over the world, you know. And, well, you've seen enough of that. Now, it's worth also saying, how do we get it to be this good? And, gosh, I'm keeping my eye on the time here as much as I can. Well, one way is to get the kids to design it themselves. So here's a group of kids who design their own space, and I'm going to take you on a little narrative path with these kids. So probably the best way to start is to hear from them about the kind of interesting. To hear from them about the space they've designed and why they think the university space ought to be like it. So here they go. I made this little video for university vice-chancellors who I thought needed to be scared a bit, really, I think. So these kids, by the way, and just before we start, these kids, by the way, it was a 3-year project, and the first year they won a prize to make over their own learning space, £20,000, a lot of money, and they spent 2 years making it over. They won the prize by saying, we haven't got a clue what we're going to do. We're going to spend a year researching. You never ask learners for their opinion, ask them for their research. And well, here they are speaking. Here they are not speaking. Oh, we get the volume, maybe. Bear with me a minute.
So it was designed by the people who are going to use it.
Sorry, if you want to turn the sound on your laptop, we'll actually use the microphone.
Can I do it through the HDMI sound? Or is that... Okay, well, let me use the microphone, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's highly fun. This will work. Of course it will.
So if we just want to move to our own space in the classroom and we need someone to write on
Can you hear that?
a paper and pen, and we can just get one of the board pens and write things down.
I love the coloured light. Does the coloured light change during the day? How does that
Yeah, they're mood lights, so they can change themselves and we can change the settings.
set different room colours? Do you think we'll get spaces like this in university?
But I think universities would have probably thought more about that because they're more experienced of students, maybe they're bigger and there's more students so they have more opinions.
I know that when I go to university there's going to be like a range of different types of learning styles, and I'll be able to choose the styles that I like to learn in, and it'll be more independent. It'll be much different from the traditional secondary school.
Do you think you'd have...
Oh, what are we... Now, he's really interesting, young Yeager, because we're still tracking these kids. So this is our 10-year research program. We're tracking them right on through. It was an EBD class. When we picked them up, their results were pretty grim when we started with them. You can see them here. That lad who just spoke is a hetero, second on the left. You can see he came in, he was attending 2 days a week, and he was well, pretty crap really. And then the project started at year 8. You can see suddenly he's gifted and talented, the school thing, and he leaves with a fistful of A's and B's, turned down a place at Imperial College in London, who wanted him because he was black and poor, and you know, he ticked all their boxes. In one kid went to Loughborough, and he went to Loughborough because he was hugely excited by their learning style. He's excited by their learning style because sport has got into learning in a really big way, and I just need to show you this very quickly. This is work I'm doing with, I work with all the British Olympic sports, not all of them, not field and track, but all the others, working with the elite coaches on their teaching and learning for their athletes. This was the hockey training centre, and you've seen it's not great, you know. It's got a projector and a bunch of seats facing the same way, and they never wanted to go in there. This was the this is the space now, and you know, they've got tiered seating around the edges. They've got a hockey pitch on the floor. They've got writable walls. They've got screens everywhere. They've got zones where they considered zones, so you do different sorts of learning. So within the one space, you're doing presentation, collaboration, research, head down, getting focused. They can't wait to get in the room now. And if you follow hockey, you'll know that during the summer, this summer, they won 3 key matches on set pieces that came straight off that floor. So, yeah, of course, I know some of you here follow rugby a little. So I'm working with the England rugby team as well. If you follow rugby, you'll know who this is. If you don't care, do you? So sport is really into all this stuff in a big way, because what we've learned from sport is that every tiny detail matters. And now this gets really interesting because, crikey, in the last 5 minutes or so, because... Oh, thank you, it's kind. So we took those children who made over their own classrooms in West London, and we took them connected them to Spain, and we asked a bunch of kids in Spain to build their own classrooms, and of course they did. And so I'll give the English version of this, I guess. And here were the classrooms they made over, and we gave them a budget. These kids here, for example, we gave them a budget of €500 total. And when they opened it, which was the day I took these photos, they gave me back €100 and said, we didn't need all the money, and we're proud to have done it to a tight budget. But what was interesting was after those spaces that they'd made over, they were so effective that their schools were transformed. These are the schools now, made over as a result of their learning. I'll tweet the link to this website. Go and listen to the teachers talking about what's happened, and you'll be... But I didn't want to show you that for that reason. I wanted to show you because they knew that in each area of their learning, they needed protocols. So how do we use the spaces? How do I use the collaborative space? How do I use the relaxed space? And they wrote the protocols. And that turned out to be key when we built Wesley College in Western Australia. We started off with a user manual of how to teach and learn in those spaces. So we thought, which I wrote with my two daughters, who are both teachers by the way, and we started off by talking about zoning, and then we talked about getting an agreed vocabulary, which is something I think you'll have to think really hard about, here having a common vocabulary so everybody uses the same. When we did it in the Caribbean, we did t-shirts with the right words printed upside down on the t-shirt so you could look down, see what, never say open plan, always say agile, that kind of stuff, And we talked about the role of the learner voice, and we said how does a family learning table work? What do we do with tiered seating and so on? And then we built in Wesley this pretty extraordinary space, which was a new science space, which was, and I know you're thinking about a science block here, 3 floors, media walls, all right, every surface is right on every window, every wall, everywhere, hydroponic walls. If you're building a science centre, the science centre itself has to be a science artefact. It has to be a science object in its own right, displaying its own data and waking your mind up to that excitement. Well, we took all that, and we took the kids from the Spanish project and we wheeled them in to the university, and we said, you know what, we would really quite like it if you would make over a space in the university to be a space you would like to come to as students. And we gave them a budget, so here they are. The space is pretty crap, it's an old warehouse. And we gave them a lot of cardboard in 2 days and their experience, and here they are. The wiring was lethal. And here they are making a cardboard replica of their space and saying, this is what we think you're going to need. We think you're going to need a Harkness table because we use those and they work really well as a place for conversation, a place for quiet learning. We think you're going to need a presentation wall at the end. We think you're going to need, oh, by the way, because they did a model of it in SketchUp, so our architects have got something to copy. And you're going to need a glass wall, and you're going to need a maker space, because how would you do anything without 3D printers and laser cutters and all the basic tools of learning everywhere? And there's the glass wall. They modelled the whole thing in cardboard, and we're now in the throes of building that. The total budget for the entire makeover is incredibly small. We're going to have spent about 200,000 on the whole thing, and when we got a group of architects to quote us, they quoted us 8 million, so there's quite a saving, but it will be better. It will be better, and I'll tweet for you a little 3D image of the space we're building, you can see. But that detail thing, here's just a sense of how important the detail is. This is some of the walls inside. What the students did was paint the walls with different paints, because they know, how do we get the lux levels up? And they realised if they painted with, this wall here is painted with Dulux Space and Light paint, which has a 34% higher refraction rate, so the light bounces. So if you painted this wall with Dulux Space and Light paint, white, the light, you'd be at more than 500 there now. And so that's Space and Light. That's the wall as it was traditionally. The one in the corner is 1 coat of emulsion. The next bit is 2 coats, and the one after that is 3 coats. But you can see which is the bright wall and all that. So the detail really, really matters here, and probably ought to leave you with 3 tiny things. We just got to visit 5 minutes probably. I'm all right, I'm still in track. So here are 3 interesting projects then that I think challenge us a little to think about how all this is going to be. The first one, I think, is a really quite cool little project. I'm building a new school at the moment. It has no building. I don't know, you've got a vigorous online program, a lot of online students, but thinking about how that works around the world is really interesting. This school, scholarliberum.org, if you want to go and look at it, it's funded by the English Government Free School Program. The students teach each other, and They teach each other in their own houses, so you five in the front row will go to sit with each other. I'm there as a dad on the Monday, you're there on Tuesday, you're there Thursday. We don't have to give up our job to be there to look after the kids. They get on, they learn from each other. There's mixed age teaching going on. It really, really, really works. You know, I haven't seen a lot of mixed age teaching going on here. I haven't seen enough of young kids and older people all mixing together. Very, very horizontal. You're going to have to be very, very vertical. And that's a very big design challenge. So the second project is quite interesting, I think, is this one. This is a master's degree. We're just in the process of validating, but you'll see that it's a degree you never leave. So you join the degree. I was walking around with Tom, he was showing me G19 and building, room he'd been in as a student, saying, God, it's cool, With this degree you never leave. And I think you'll find that higher education is moving towards a model of membership rather than just accreditation. You belong to things. You don't turn up, get your certificate and go. You turn up, you have a good feeling about the longevity of your relationship with a place. And that is what you're buying into. You're belonging to the family that is your campus and your students, whether you're here or not. And this is a really interesting thing. We've done a mass of focus groups and online surveys and so on. The big shock for us was, with this, 3/4 of the people who've applied to do it have already got a master's or better. And they said, you know what, I really enjoyed doing my master's. I don't want to go on and do a PhD, I love that level of conversation. Don't want to ever finish, just want to keep going. And by the way, there's no fees on this, it's a gym membership, so you pay a monthly fee to be on the course, and it's as simple as that. About €15 a month, by the way. So this is a whole new world you're coming into. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because the signification you've got, the cues and clues of membership and family and community are probably stronger here than most universities in the world. And that really, really, really matters. So you've got to be so careful as you move into this third millennium. Remember, from next year onwards, every child in school in Europe was born in this millennium, and every teacher was born in the last millennium. So it's a really interesting little moment for us, As you move into working with the children who are of this millennium, you've got to be so careful not to lose the value and the signification of the provenance of your history, not as an artifact, but as something to belong to and be a member of. And I'll perhaps leave you with this lovely image on the door of one of the schools in Madrid, which I'm rather fond of, I think. And it says this, it's a permanent sign. And it says, we're never going to finish. And one of the things, walking around with Tom, we kept looking at buildings that have been finished and, get out of that mindset. Every building, every room, every scrap of furniture, every carpet will never be finished. Ask yourself the question every day, every hour, every minute, how can my learners make this a better place? And you're those learners too, of course. We've gone from doing this to our students, through co-constructing with them, to using their voice to determine where we're going with our wisdom and our history. And that's a new place to be, and very exciting indeed. You've got all the components, you've got the three-sided spaces, you've got the little booths, you've got the rich media background, you've got the imagination, you've just got to make it pervasive and playful and seductive and engaging. And that ain't so hard, is it really? I'll stop there. I'm here all day, you can chat more about this. Thank you.